Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. There are two verses. This first verse we will repeat by myself. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, 6th canto, 7th chapter, text number 37 and 38. Tathapi na pratibhruyam gurubhi prarthitam kiyat bhavatam prarthitam sarvam praner arthaishcha sadhaye. Translation purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Translation. All of you are my superiors, therefore, although accepting priesthood is sometimes reproachable, I cannot refuse even a small request from you. I agree to be your priest. I shall fulfill your request by dedicating my life and possessions. Text number 38. We shall repeat together. Shri Bhadarayani Ruvacha
Shri Bhadarayani Ruvacha
Tebhya evam pratishrutya
Tebhya evam
Vishwarupo Mahatapaha
Vishwarupo Mahatapaha
Paurahityam Vrataschakre
Parahityam
Paramena Samadhina.
Samadhina. Translation. Sri Sukadev Goswami continued, O king, after making this promise to the demigods, the exalted Vishvarupa, surrounded by the demigods, performed the necessary priestly activities with great enthusiasm and attention. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. The word samadhina is very important. Samadhi means complete absorption with an undiverted mind. Vishvarupa, who was a most learned Brahmana, not only accepted the request of the demigods, but took their request seriously and performed the activities of priesthood with an undiverted mind. In other words, he accepted the priesthood not for material gain, but to profit the demigods. Such is the duty of a priest. The word Pura means family, and Hitta means benefit. Thus, the word Purahit indicates the priest is the well-wisher of the family. Another meaning of the word Pura is first. The priest's first duty is to see that his disciples benefit spiritually and materially by all means. Then he is satisfied. A priest should never be interested in performing Vedic rituals for his personal benefit. So taking up duty when you're given an instruction or an order from your superiors. This is the duty sometimes we have to perform. Sometimes we don't want to accept that duty, or we're given a duty to perform that seems very, ominous, very, like Arjuna in the battle. He saw all his cousin brothers, his family in front of him, his teachers, his grandfather, and he decided he couldn't fight. He couldn't fight with his family members like that. So he dropped his Gandiva bow and he said he couldn't fight. He'd rather go off to the forest and meditate. But Krishna told him, no, Arjuna, you must rise up, you must fight. And then for 45 minutes it took Krishna to convince Arjuna to perform his duty. But so sometimes we're given a task to do that seems very difficult or it's not wanted. We don't want to do it. But if our authority is requesting us, if the bona fide, superior is requesting, then we need to take it up. Just as Vishvarupa, he was Brahman. He wanted just to perform his Brahminical duties. He wasn't thinking of becoming, a priest, a guru of the demigods, but he was requested. And so he accepted the request, and he took it seriously, as Prabhupada said. So, Arjun didn't want to face his family members and his grandfather, but he had to take it up, and so he fought very seriously. And this is sometimes we're given a request, and it's not what we wanted, it's not what we were thinking about, but it comes, and then, when we do it and we put our mind and our effort and our heart into it, then generally it's very satisfying, because then we're doing our duty. We're doing what we are supposed to be doing, what we have been instructed to do. And if we actually put our heart into it, then it becomes very satisfying. Anyway, I've given the example a number of times, but it was like Bhardraj with the artist, and he had no idea of going to India to make dioramas and make dolls, but when Srila Prabhupada requested him, he did it, and then that became his main service after that. But then there are times that we're asked to do things by our authorities. Sometimes we don't think it's right. But and there are times that maybe it might not be exactly right, but if we don't know at the time, we're just not sure, we have to follow the authority. At that point, we have to follow the authority. I'll give two examples. One where we have to follow the authority, and that is at times when, let me just give the first example. Srila Prabhupada was, there was I think two devotees, and they were in Hawaii, and there was a GBC who had a fall down. It was a serious fall down for himself, for that particular sannyasi. He was sannyasi GBC. And he had a personal fall down. But his fall down only affected himself personally. It didn't affect anyone else. And Prabhupada didn't remove him from his position. He remained in that position. But there was two devotees, they were chanting 64 rounds a day. And the sannyasi was only chanting 16. So these two devotees thought that they were in a superior position. So they didn't want to take the instruction from that GBC member anymore. And it created some, disharmony at the temple. So it came to Prabhupada's attention, and these two devotees came to Los Angeles to speak with Srila Prabhupada. And they told Srila Prabhupada, they were chanting more rounds. They didn't feel they had fallen down, but this sannyasi had fallen down, so they didn't want to take instructions from him. And they said, Srila Prabhupada, we would like to take instructions directly from you. So Prabhupada said, no, you must take instruction from you must follow your GBC authority. But they kept arguing that they didn't feel that was that they were more advanced than he was. So Prabhupada said, so you want to take instruction from me? And they said, yes, Prabhupada, that's what we want. We want you to give us the instruction directly. So Prabhupada said, I am instructing you, you must follow the GBC. And their first response, no, Srila Prabhupada, we can't do that. So in the end, Srila Prabhupada rejected them. He actually rejected them. He said, they're no longer my disciple, because they refused to accept his instruction. He said, you wanted to follow my instruction, I am giving you instruction, follow the GBC, and they couldn't, they refused. So then Prabhupada actually said they're no longer his disciple. So that was a fall down. The GBC, the sannyasi did have a fall down. But as I said, it didn't affect anyone else, and he went to Srila Prabhupada, he begged for forgiveness, and then he corrected himself. So Prabhupada didn't remove him. But there was another example of a GBC who is actually, I think it's safe enough to mention names because it was a well-known, everyone knows about it. It was Bali Mardan Maharaj. Well, he was a Maharaj. Bali Mardan was GBC for New York and I think also Japan. He was in Japan and there was a Mataji coming to the temple whose last name was Toyota. And she claimed that she was an heir to the Toyota fortune. So she had, everyone thought she was going to inherit, basically billions of dollars, at least hundreds of millions. And so she took a liking to Bali Mardan, who was a sannyasi, and he, wound up leaving sannyas and marrying her, thinking if he married her, then he could engage all of that Lakshmi into Krishna's service and serving Prabhupada. But they moved they were in New York, and at the New York temple, this Mataji, she had the habit of eating fish before, and she wanted fish. So she requested her husband to have the temple buy fish, prepare it in Radharani's kitchen, and offer it to the deities so she could eat it as prasada. Obviously, that is a completely against all the principles. Against many principles, but not in Radharani's kitchen, not. But she insisted, and she told her husband that if he didn't do this and she didn't get this fish prasadam, that she was going to leave. So Bali Mardan requested and actually ordered the devotees to do that, to go buy fish, prepare it in the kitchen, in the deity's kitchen, and offer it to the deities. And they didn't want to do it, but he told them, I am your GBC, you must follow my instruction. And they did it. And eventually, Prabhupada found out. And he was furious. He was very angry. Of course, he chastised Bali Mardan, but he also chastised the devotees who did that activity. There was one devotee was telling me he was part of that group. And so he was telling that Prabhupada met with them. He came to New York and he met with them. And Prabhupada was very heavy and chastising them. And so the devotee spoke up and he said, but Srila Prabhupada, he's our GBC and he was requesting us to do this. And you've told us that we should follow our authority, even, so we should just, and so Prabhupada said, but not if you know they're wrong. He said, do you know that buying fish and taking it into the Radharani's kitchen? He said, do you know that is wrong? And he said, yes, Prabhupada. Do you know it's wrong to offer it? And yes, Prabhupada. Then you shouldn't have followed the GBC's order. So when you know absolutely that authority is wrong, when you know they're giving you the wrong direction, then you can reject their authority. That, I call that it is a Bali Mardan moment in that sense, but a Bali Maharaj moment, because Bali Maharaj knew when Sukacharya told him not to obey Vamandev, not to give him his 3 steps, then Bali Maharaj knew that his guru was not giving good instruction. He knew his instruction was not good. And so he disobeyed his guru. Normally, you do not disobey your authority. Normally, you would not. But if you're not sure, even if you think it might be a wrong instruction, like these devotees in Hawaii, that were thinking, well, their authority may be flawed, so they shouldn't have to follow him. But even if you think it may be wrong, but if you don't know for sure, you should follow your authority. And of course, those are arguments I give on the Ridvik issue and the Guru issue as well. When you know if you don't know they're wrong, I mean, you might think they're wrong, but you don't know for sure, then you should follow your authority. But that point when you reach the point, you know their instructions are wrong, and you know what is right, and you know they are wrong. At that point, you should not follow. That's the example Prabhupada gave with Bali Mardan. That he chastised the devotees for following their authority when they knew it was actually wrong. Vishvarupa was asked to do this service, and even though it wasn't what he wanted to do, he took it up full-heartedly. The word used is samadhina, and which is samadhi, means he took it with full absorption, with an undiverted mind. And that's how we should do all of our services, all our duties. And anyone who is successful in life, businessmen, big entrepreneurs and things, they become focused on doing what they're doing. They, have an undiverted mind on what they're doing. And then they become successful in that. So when we're chanting our japa, we should do it in this samadhi. We should do it with complete absorption and undiverted mind. So even if someone, while we're chanting, and comes up and says, "Oh, Prabhu," and starts talking and starts diverting you, still should keep your mind, even if you have to take care of some other business, but you keep your mind focused on that chanting. You come back and you resume the chanting. But whatever we're doing, deity worship, cooking for Krishna, whatever we're doing, whatever activity, should do it in this mood of samadhi, this complete absorption in an undiverted mind. And that is how we become successful. That is how we achieve the results and achieve the fruit of our activity of what we're doing. Not that we're receiving the fruit in a materialistic way, but the fruit of the chanting, in this sense, is our purification. So we will receive the most elevation by this process. And I'm not, I'm not qualified to give class in things and to talk about these things, in one sense, because I need the class as much as any of you. I need the instructions as much as any of you. I noticed with Prabhupada, there was I think it was GBC. It fell down, had some affair, and he was married, but he had an affair with, I don't know if it was another man's wife or another brahmachari, whatever it was. But he apologized, he begged Prabhupada for forgiveness, and then Prabhupada told him to give class on that topic of controlling sex desire. You would think he would not be the person who's qualified to give that class. You would think Prabhupada would not want him to give a class on that topic because he had just fallen down from that. But I noticed Prabhupada did that, and because by doing that, that devotee had to, come to the understanding of why it was wrong and how to, prevent that. And he was giving the class for himself. So in these ways, I've always considered myself more of an insignificant devotee. I never took a position in leadership in ISKCON much. I mean, I had the diorama projects. I was doing the audio-visual with it. But I never considered myself that much, I considered myself somewhat of an insignificant disciple of Srila Prabhupada. But lately, from coming to India, and I'm very humbled by the respect the devotees showing. And it's very humbling. In a sense, it's embarrassing. But I know that respect is not given to me. It's given because of Srila Prabhupada. It's actually giving to Srila Prabhupada. And that's the way, I have to take it, because I don't feel qualified that devotees are deserving. The devotees are here and other places are giving some respect. So I have to understand that respect is only because of Srila Prabhupada. And it's being passed on to him. But on one hand, we can't sometimes reject something that is being offered. What I mean by that is, just like Vishvarupa was being offered to become the priest of the demigods, it isn't if he felt like he wasn't qualified that he should reject it entirely because his superiors were requesting him. And like it said here, they were like family with him. He was part of the demigods, and they're requesting him. So he had to accept it. He couldn't just reject it. As he says here, I can't even refuse a small request from you. So he agreed to become their priest. And in that sense, now he was instructing them. But sometimes we have to accept a position when we're given that position, but we should obviously always do it in a humble state of mind. But I was just thinking of Kurandar. Kurandar was a leading GBC when I joined in the early 70s. And he was very staunch. He had a very staunch demeanor of him. Always very serious face and very determined. But he had a fall down. And he left his post as GBC for some time. But then Prabhupada gave him when he came back, and Prabhupada was in India, he came to India to see Prabhupada, and then Prabhupada made him GBC for India. And the thing is that he felt that he wasn't deserving of that position, and so he resigned from that position as well. And that was a mistake. It was actually a mistake for him to resign, because Prabhupada had given him that position to take it back so he could restore his tejas, his Krishna conscious abilities, and his service. But he felt that he wasn't qualified for that position, and because he had just fallen down, and he felt that he shouldn't accept respect from devotees because he had fallen down, and so he refused. He gave up that position, and that was a mistake, because from then he never again recovered. He came back to Los Angeles. He took service with the Fate Project as a financial director, and at that time I had an association, but he never actually. Prabhupada was in LA, and like I said, we shared an office together, Kurandar and I, and Tamal Krishna came over, and he said, Prabhupada's requesting you to come to his room, told Kurandar. And Kurandar said, oh, he can't come. And he said, Prabhupada's requesting you. And so he had to go back to Srila Prabhupada. I think it was Tamal. It was one of the servants. So the servant had to go back to Srila Prabhupada and say that Kurandar didn't feel, he didn't want to come. So back and forth, I think another time the servant came and said, Prabhupada wants to see you. You have to go. And again he refused. And the third time they came back and said, Prabhupada said, if you don't come, then you're no longer his disciple. And still, Kurandar refused. So it was a mistake, because he didn't want, and he told me he didn't want Prabhupada to give him another, respectable service again, because he didn't feel qualified. So sometimes when we don't feel qualified, but we're given some respect, we shouldn't just reject it. If it's someone's giving it in a sincere way, but like for myself, I know I'm not worthy, so I pass it on to Srila Prabhupada. I know that respect is given because of Srila Prabhupada, not because of me. So and so sometimes when we're asked to do something, we don't feel qualified. If we know we're not qualified, well, then maybe we shouldn't take it. But if we just in a humble way don't feel qualified, we should take it up, because then if our superiors are requesting, like with Vishwarupa. So what time was that, or what? Oh yeah, it's okay. So since I'm only here it was maybe my last class, you might want to hear a story about Prabhupada or something, maybe. Anybody want to hear something about Prabhupada? Nobody? Anyway, because I didn't have that much personal association with Prabhupada, direct, one-on-one. I was just thinking the other night that I did have a very wonderful exchange with Srila Prabhupada, but not with speaking, not with words. So it's going to take a little while to explain the story, but I wanted to share it, is that, anyway, I at one point in my, as I was a devotee, I realized I had a problem looking at people, not just devotees, but people eye to eye. I had a problem with eye-to-eye contact. And when I started working with the diorama exhibits and started doing the electronics design of it, I started dealing with professional people on a professional basis. And I would go and anyway, that was one thing, but I always had a problem that somebody would start talking to me and I'd look down, I'd look the other way, I'd look at something else while they're talking, and then that would distract the conversation. And so then in one of the professional magazines, the electronics magazines, it said that, when you're dealing with professional people, you should always give eye-to-eye contact and direct eye-to-eye contact. Then I realized, I have this problem. And so I thought, I've got to practice on this. So the very next devotee I started practicing on was one of my godbrothers, and he started talking to me, and I just looked at him right in the eye. First time, I wanted to look away, but no, I'm just going to do eye-to-eye contact. And so we had this conversation. And it's the first time I really, made a point of giving eye-to-eye contact like that. So the next day I was walking by, and that same devotee was talking to a group of other devotees, and he said, take Ameyatma, for example. And he stops me, and he said, when you have a conversation with him, he gives you eye-to-eye contact. And he was giving me as the example. And I thought, oh my God. He was the first one. That was the first time I did it. Anyway, so then he started explaining how this eye-to-eye contact, when you have eye-to-eye contact, you actually can communicate with someone. The face is the index to the mind, and the eyes are the portal into the mind, into the soul. You can actually communicate with that person through eye-to-eye contact. And he was explaining how, you can tell, if somebody's lying and you're speaking to them and you ask them, yeah, I'll do that, Prabhu. Yeah, sure, I'll do it. You can read the index. So when he said that, I had been, there was an exchange with Prabhupada that I had been having at that point. And what it was is that when Prabhupada would come to the LA temple, so many devotees from all over temples would come. So the temple room would be packed. And especially you get closer to Prabhupada's Vyasa during the Vyasa Puja, and everyone's dancing. The square footage, real estate is very rare, So many devotees are packed right next to each other. So at the end, when Prabhupada would go, Jai Om Vishnupad, everybody would dive down to the ground, and you only had 1 square foot when you're all packed, and where are you going, So many times I would get a lotus foot on my head, and take the dust of the devotee in front of me, and once in a while I, hit my foot on somebody else's head, and I thought, well, this isn't very good. So one day when Prabhupada went Jai Om and everybody's hitting, I just looked for a second. I waited 1 second. Is there any room here? And there wasn't any room. And so I just stood there. And Prabhupada's chanting the prayers, and I just put my head down and I stood, and then I started looking around, and nobody else was standing. I was the only one in the whole temple standing. So I kind of sheepishly looked up to Srila Prabhupada to see and he's looking right at me. And I thought at first, oh my God, and I put my head down, and I thought, he's thinking, at first I thought he must think I'm being disrespectful for not offering my obeisances like that. But then I knew in my heart, because I had that exchange with Prabhupada, I knew he knew my heart. And so I look up again, and Prabhupada's still looking at me. But I knew he understood. But that happened, that kept happening, because every time I hesitated, there was no room. So it happened a number of times. I wasn't trying to do it, but it would just happen. And I noticed every time I did it, when I looked up, Srila Prabhupada would be looking at me. And every time, I would put my head down immediately. So I told this story for a Vyasa Puja offering in Orlando. Prabhupada disciples were giving our Vyasa Puja offering, and that year I didn't write one, so I just, Shesha was there, who was the GBC, and he asked me to give the offering first. So I just told the story. I haven't told the whole story yet, but when I told the story, he said, that's amazing, Prabhu, because his offering was, because what I'll tell, and the whole story is that I actually got Prabhupada's mercy by keeping eye-to-eye contact. I'll explain that in a minute. But Shesha was saying that his story was that he felt, it was a big disappointment later that he didn't take that eye-to-eye contact. He said, every time Prabhupada would look at him, he would just immediately look away, because he thought, and he knew Prabhupada could see within him, and he felt embarrassed that I've performed so many, either sinful activities, or I'm not doing my service nicely or something. So he'd always look down. And that was always my tendency as well. But after that devotee, my godbrother, Gautama, was saying how important it was you can communicate with eye-to-eye contact, I thought, I wonder what will happen if I don't look down. And I just keep looking straight at Prabhupada, eye-to-eye contact. I was wondering, how will we communicate? Will be some kind of, what will happen? So I didn't do it on purpose, but the next time that took place, and there wasn't any room, so I just was standing. Sometimes I'd kneel on one knee, but I was, not all the way down. But that day, I thought, I looked up, and yes, Prabhupada was looking right at me, just like he always had. So and my tendency was immediately look down, but I thought, no, I'm going to keep looking, and just to see. And I kept wanting to look away, but Prabhupada just kept looking. He wasn't looking away. And then I thought, well, if he's not going to look away, if he's going to give me the mercy of his glance, then why should I not take it? I should take it. For as long as he's going to give me his mercy, I should take that, the mercy of his glance. And so I just kept, forcing myself, basically, at first, to not look away. And for the entire prayers, Prabhupada never looked away. And I've taken tapes, and I've timed them, and it's approximately probably about 1.5 minutes. The Prabhupada just didn't look away, and I didn't look away. And so there was 2 words that can explain what I felt from that. Well, let's put it as 3 or 4 words. I wanted to say mercy and compassion, but let me just say pure mercy and pure compassion. Those were the feelings that I got. Not just words of mercy and compassion, but real, I felt Prabhupada's mercy, and I could feel his compassion. He was just so compassionate, and it was just beaming out from him. And he didn't, like I said, he didn't look away, and it was just this. And then I felt toward the end like he was like calling me, like wanting to bring me in to him, to like say, come with him, come on this journey with him, like beckoning me to come. And so at that point, practically I couldn't look away. And I just, anyway, I wanted to share that because devotees asked me if I had, like a one-on-one personal exchange with Srila Prabhupada. And I usually tell them, no, I didn't actually have that. But then I remembered that actually this was probably a very rare personal exchange that I had with Prabhupada, without speaking a word. But, that was, what I saw is just that pure mercy and pure compassion that he had for the fallen souls and the conditioned souls, and that beckoning to please come back home, back to Godhead with him. And then, just in case, at one point when it first started, I was thinking, is this childish? Because I was thinking, the game children play, to see who's going to blink first. You stare at each other and see who's going to blink first. First I thought, well, Prabhupada, what will you think about? But then, no, I did it. But then, in case you're wondering, I did look down first. When Prabhupada finally finished the prayers and everyone, Namo Om Vishnu Padaya, then I put my head down. But Prabhupada did stay the entire time looking. And of course, that was great mercy, and it was a wonderful experience. So I guess there's time for any questions.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Prabhu, last class, you have told about how you came in touch with Prabhupada Krishna book in library.
Okay, I have a little bit of problem hearing, so I couldn't understand. I'm sorry.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Last class, you have told about how you came in touch with Krishna book, Prabhupada Krishna book in the library, in library.
Uh-huh.
So after reading that Krishna book, how it leads you to join the movement?
How what?
How that reading Krishna book leads you to join to the ISKCON? Can you share with us?
Yeah. Actually, that day in the library when I found the book, I didn't have to read one word. I just saw the picture because I was wanting to know what God looks like and what his activities are. And so I got that just by looking at the photos. When we did the diorama exhibits and we were walking Prabhupada through, before we put the dioramas in, we just had, it was under construction, so everything was just, 2x4s. But the exhibit areas were there, and we got to the last exhibit, and we would tell Prabhupada what each exhibit was, and we got to the end, and Srila Prabhupada said, these museums, without reading one word, they will understand our philosophy, so, Bhagavat philosophy. So the pictures were like that in the Krishna book. Not that I didn't read it, I read it, but the pictures were like that for me. I got everything. So when I whoever wrote that book, I would accept him as my spiritual master. And when I turned it over and saw Srila Prabhupada's picture, I immediately accepted Prabhupada. If I would have known where a temple was, I would have joined immediately. But in those early books, there was no temple address, nothing about going to a Sunday feast or anything like that. So if I would have known about that, I would have joined immediately. There was, because already I had found Gita, not Prabhupada's Gita, a year before, and I really wanted to study and I wanted to know more, and if I would have known a temple then, I would have gone. But when I found Prabhupada's books, no, I had accepted him immediately. You know, I can't say he was my guru because Prabhupada hadn't accepted me yet, but I had accepted him. And it was a interesting journey because in those 3 years, embarrassing part is, yeah, I became hippie and got into that culture, you know. But Krishna was like, it was already the center, you know. And I would tell everybody I would meet, I'd tell them about Krishna. And I tell them that in the future there will be one religion. There will be one scripture, Bhagavad Gita, and God will be known as Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. I used to preach everywhere, and people I'd meet, I was into like wanting to become a musician. So I met rock musicians, and I would always preach to them about Krishna. And then even when I found out about the Los Angeles temple, I went to an Indian grocery store to buy Indian incense because I liked the incense from, the Indian incense better. And so I looked up in the Yellow Pages and found a grocery store, Indian groceries, like 20 miles from my house or more. And I went there, never been there before. It was in a mall. And first of all, I saw outside there was a picture of baby Krishna poster. And I had already started learning to read the Sanskrit, the Devanagari Sanskrit from Upanishads that I found in the library. So when I went to the store, I asked the man, I said, how much is that poster of Krishna on the window? And he said, oh, that's not for sale. That's the last poster I have of Krishna. It's not for sale. And I said, the one that says Balarupa Sri Krishna on it, because it is written in Sanskrit. He said, you can read Sanskrit? And then he said, oh, you can have the poster. He said, I'm going to India in a few weeks. I said, I'll buy more of them. But he said he didn't want that last poster to leave. Then he said, have you been to the Krishna temple? And I said, what temple? And he said, you don't know? And so he had a stack of Back to Godhead magazines. He said every month they come out with a new magazine and they distribute it in front of his store. And said they give him a copy and he has all these BTGs. So he gave me the whole stack. And then I found out where a temple was. Not only Los Angeles, it was the whole addresses in there. And every time I went to the temple, I know it said about the Sunday feast, but I was thinking, I don't want to go to eat. I didn't know really about prasadam that time. So I didn't want to just go to eat something. I wanted to go to join. So I'd always go in the middle. I'd go on a Saturday. And I'd go on Saturday, and I went, at least 3 times. And I went on Saturday and nobody there. What I thought was the temple door, it wasn't the temple at that time, it is now, the temple room. But I'd knock on the door, it'd be locked, nobody around, and I'd leave. So like 3 times I went and nobody there. And then I got where I traveled across the country with my guitar and, and I took the Back to Godhead magazines and I would always tear out and give a picture of Krishna. This is what God looks like. This is God. And then I'd have the addresses and I'd tell them, go to the nearest temple. Tell people to go to the temple. I hadn't been yet. And I got to Florida and there was a temple in Fort Lauderdale. And I finally convinced about 20 to 30 people we were going to go to the temple. We took like 2 vans and a car and, packed with all these young people, hippies, but I was taking them to the temple. And finally I was going to go to the temple. And we got there and it said Radha Krishna Temple. And it was all painted in pastels, a house. And I thought, I finally come to the temple. And it was a Sunday feast. And we go and knock on the door's locked. We look in the windows, there's nobody inside. We're going around to the side, tapping on the window. Nobody there. The guy comes out next door, are you looking for those Hare Krishnas? And So they moved last week. No forwarding address. So it took me 3 years to finally join the temple. But it was all of Srila Prabhupada. Well, it was those 3 books that I got, the Nectar Devotion, Krishna book, and Teachings of Lord Chaitanya. I got at the same time at the library. Just seeing the pictures, and I already accepted Prabhupada, but reading it, I wanted more and more. And I gave my life, basically I can't say I was like I was a devotee because, it was hippie time. I was smoking ganja and, taking LSD at the same time. I'm not going to say I was like so pure, but I didn't know anything. I didn't, what I knew, but so it took some time. Any other questions? All right. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.